I mean, I knew an astronomer who said, the way you deal with these huge distances, you just don't think about it. You just plug the numbers into the equations, and don't worry about visualizing 22 million light years. Which I have trouble visualizing walking down to the corner to the store. Much like. But something I was reminded of something when Bob was talking about it all being metaphor, and I actually looked it up. I'm confessing I looked up on the internet because I wanted to get the quote exactly right, but I remembered something from the 39 Articles of the Anglican Church, which is where Bob is coming out of. And I was always impressed with the first article where they talk about God being, and I'm going to quote now, everlasting, without body, parts, or passions. So not a man on a throne, not, this is God is beyond all of our ideas. And that gets back to one of my favorite things is if God is of infinite power, nothing we can say about him can be the truth. We perforce lie. We don't do it intentionally, but we simply cannot. Every time we try to describe God, we are falling short. The best we can do is try to describe what God is not. And even that, I think you might have some problems, because who's to say what God isn't? But it's still, metaphor is the only way we can really understand these things, I think. We can know that there isn't a man on a throne, but we can use this as an image.
I think C.S. Lewis went into this in his Problem of Pain book, where, so God is an infinite intelligence, but we like in the three-dimensional beings and with limited intellects cannot possibly comprehend what God is like. But whatever he is, in the end, if we ever get to meet him and find out his true self, it'll be something in the direction of what we think is perfection, rather than in the totally opposite direction. Meaning, if he's infinite good, he will be in the direction of more and more good, not in the absurd direction of
right.
We're tending to the limit of infinity, but it's in the direction of what that goodness is. It's not in the opposite direction. If we come face to face with him, eventually, we will be pleasantly surprised, but not totally shocked.
Right.
Basically.
So we were walking in that direction, even if we couldn't see where we were going, and even if we were kind of not putting our feet right exactly. But I think we do know deep down. Wow. This gets back to Roger talking about doing the right thing, but I think we do know there is such a thing as human conscience. We do have.
But hold on, though. Let me step in.
Really. Here he comes. Here comes the Gnostic.
You got to
be excited.
Very painful to talk. But so, what gives you the idea that God even knows that we exist? I mean, I can go outside and walk down the sidewalk, step on a snail,
right?
Go and step in my yard. Snail guts are, become food for some bacterial,
critters,
and that thing is going to end up having some sort of momentary cosmic awareness and call us God, because we know it knows that somehow we created it, but yet we don't know of its existence, and we couldn't care less. What about that?
Wait, what's the question? What give us the idea that God might exist?
Why would he care?
Oh, I.
Yeah. What would he even? If he was so great, then why would he even consider us important enough to even pay attention to? Basically.
Well, why would he have made?
If it depends on your perspective of who he is, right? Mm-hmm. If we think he is love, and that is the Christian understanding of God, God is love, right?
Okay, but okay.
That's what
So
John.
just to reiterate what I said. So Bob Dub asked, "Why did He create us?" He may not even know. Like I said, just bacteria. When we spread, when we move an item to one place to another, we dip our fingers in milk, and the next day there's culture on in the milk. We don't know that. We don't care. We're gonna figure it out. We see it.
I'm so glad you brought this up, V, because you give me a chance to use a term that I haven't had a chance to say out loud in years. But this reminds me of a concept called, I believe, I hope I get this right, Deus abscondus, which is the God that runs away, or the God that hides, the God that makes us and then has no interest in us anymore and just kind of creates us. I would point out in your metaphor that you're not actually creating life, you're creating the conditions for a life. If you kill a snail, hopefully you're doing it unintentionally, so you don't have any bad karma. There's my Buddhism coming out. But if you kill the snail, and of course other beings are going to feed off of it. Bacteria, a bird might come along. Oh, that shell is broken. I can get at that tasty treat. So if you're acting without awareness, and these things happen, certainly some of these beings are going to be, if they knew about you, I have doubts about how much bacteria knows, but if they do know about you, they might very well be grateful for you. They might even create a whole mythology around this wonderful being that provided us with a chance to build this great, microbe civilization.
Right.
But I think one of the things that struck me about thinking about religion and thinking about Christianity, and it was, I forget what, it was actually a poem, and talked about how, I talked before about how we can understand something through analogy. So I cannot understand a higher being, but I can understand my cat. And my cat is to me as I am to something that's higher. So even though my cat can never fully understand me, my cat can communicate with me in a limited way. My cat and I obviously interact, but my cat can never understand about why I have to leave the house to go earn a paycheck to pay for cat food. My cat doesn't understand why it has to go to the vet, to get treated for something. So there's this complete misunderstanding. And with a God like we're talking about, it's like an amoeba, right?
Right.
To me.
Right.
So
we are the amoeba.
So we're the amoeba, and we're not aware of amoebas. So how would God be aware of us? And to me, when we're talking, I'm almost done. When we're talking about Christianity, to me, the miracle part of it is this God would actually come down to this speck of dust, circling another speck of dust. And here I am, smaller than a speck of dust on a speck of dust, and come and talk to me. That is truly a godlike power, to be able to notice an amoeba. So I don't know the answer to your question, V, because really, what you're saying, and coming from a completely logical, mechanistic, everything, that can make as much sense as anything else if you're going to posit divine beings. That was always one of my things. How do we know God is good? Look at all these gods that aren't good. Look at, I think it's in Isaiah, I create the light, I create the darkness, I create good, I create evil, I, the Lord, do all these things. In a certain sense, a monotheistic theology insists upon God being just as responsible for evil. Who created Satan, right? So it's very easy to find all of these moral ambiguities, all these ethical questions, when we're looking at it from that perspective. But we're also looking at it from the perspective of people's lived experience of their religious experiences. And I've always said we are spiritual creatures. I think we all here know that feeling we're reaching out for something. We have a spiritual aspect in our lives. Some of it are able to reach out to it through the traditional forms of regular religion. Some of us, like Bob, has come out of traditional religion, but has also embellished that and developed it further with her own ideas, but they're still very, very much informed by these things. Others of us are like, V, you're kind of a Gnostic. And again, you remind me a lot of myself when I was a younger man, searching for spirituality. And all these things you're saying are true. But I also think that we also have to accept as valid people's religious experiences. You know, and I don't personally limit that to a particular faith. I think that St. John of the Cross was just as enlightened as, you know, the Buddha or an Arhat in the Buddhist tradition as a Protestant mystic. So,
yes, but faith is programming. You can debate that or not, but it's programming. So you'll have certain.
Well, of course it is. We're all programmed.
And
you know, we want to pick a program that works for us. Because man, we're going to be dead a long time.
When you have shared programming, you're going to have shared experiences.
Yes.
So I don't think that's necessarily a validation for, you know, there's what they call mass hysteria. I don't believe in mass hysteria. However, I do believe in there being a logical explanation for things, you know, like government, you know, chemical weapon attack on a village. You know, you know, there's always something. You know, they did that with the city of France, actually. Yeah, they poisoned the water into this one town. Everybody was hallucinating for 4 or 5 days straight. Everybody had their own religious experience.
Which event are you talking about there, B?
I'm sorry?
Which event were you talking about where everybody was hallucinating?
So the CIA, it's I can't remember.
Oh, I see. I think I think
just trying to find chemicals to weaponize for whatever
I
purposes.
think it's called a remote viewing, isn't it?
No.
No, that's Mr. Robot. Don't.
It sounds familiar to what Mr. Robot is talking about.
Well, this was when they put LSD in the water supply for a village to see what would happen.
I don't think it was LSD, but they were testing out certain biochemical agents, and they just decided, I guess randomly, some town in France, and just this whole town just went nuts for like 4 or 5 days. People had all kinds of religious experiences, and people, you know, just lost their minds, became feral animals. And, it was the French government just kind of wrote it off as a like a water contamination and forgot sort of situation. However, it was CIA, and the CIA admitted to it several years later. Like, what you gonna do, France? Put the balls on that, right? But anyways, yeah. So I mean, the experience. One talk about the experience, and I know there are those who like to talk about DMT. You know, it provides you that religious experience as well as one is slipping into death. However, you know, and I brought this up before, and we had talked about this. You know, the state of being that one, like you go to the plane of existence that your mind is locked into whenever you die. I've always had a concept of it. And I asked you about that previously, and I think you gave a name to it today. The first one. What was that again?
I just said, huh.
Well, so you said it's a Buddhist concept that, you know, you get sent to this hell or this heaven or whatever based on your mind.
The Deva.
Oh yeah, your state of mind determines is a large determinant in what happens to you when you die. But at the same time, this is an extrapolation of how your state of mind determines what's going to happen to you all through your life, because we keep taking on new identities. Buddhism has a lot to do with about what we think of as the ego.